This session is brought to you with the help of Sundial Cannabis, the natural alternative for modern wellness. Hello and welcome to Sessions by the Herb Life. My name is Tiana, your friendly sessions facilitator, and we are back for season 2 with a new lineup of women, mostly with a sprinkling of man here and there, who have made cannabis their business. Sessions is a podcast that aims to bring forth the conversations that are happening on the ground of the cannabis industry, to generate new ideas and highlight the dedication of some of the plant's greatest advocates. By bringing together a rotating roster of people with an emphasis on women and diversity, we hope to share with you the passions, the challenges, and the triumphs of those working in the cannabis space. Much like you, my job really is to sit back and enjoy the ride. This episode, you'll hear from Zoe Helene, founder of Cosmic Sister, and Robyn Griggs Lawrence, author of the book Pot in Pans, A History of Eating Cannabis, which, by the way, was released earlier this year and is an incredibly well-researched and interesting story about the origins of cannabis as food, along with some very delicious recipes. Now, Robyn is the author of several books and is also an editor and writer at Sensi magazine, and the founder of Cannabis Kitchen, a Colorado-based cannabis catering service. But before cannabis, Robyn was editor-in-chief at Natural Home magazine, and she and Zoe talk quite a bit about their shared ideas around cannabis as a natural ingredient, one that fits effortlessly within our shifting lifestyles toward a more natural, organic, chemical-free way of living. They discuss at length cannabis as a medicine, as nutrition, and as an overall tool for self-exploration, and also how cannabis basically makes almost everything better, including airports, according to Robyn. It's interesting to me that while in many respects we should be celebrating the end of prohibition, or at least the shift towards cannabis freedom, when I hear veterans of the cannabis industry speak, I can't help but feel there is to some extent a degradation of the true spirit of cannabis. I suppose it is the world we live in that there are always going to be people who are in it for the wrong reasons, so I try to remind myself that this is exactly why Sessions exists, to bring you into the fold and to give you a direct line into the conversations happening between people like Zoe and Robyn. I highly recommend you check out Robyn's book and also head over to the Cosmic Sister site, as they are doing some wonderful work in helping support women working with not just cannabis, but many other plant medicines as well. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Zoe and Robyn.
When they asked me to pick somebody for this, I know so many people like you do, and you were the first person to come to mind.
Aw, that's so sweet. Thank you.
It is. And I've been thinking about what to say here, and the way I look at it is, if I leave one thing with the listeners, you deserve a great deal of recognition for the work that you do, some of it behind the scenes, some of it not so much, for, influencing cannabis culture in some really beautiful ways that matter to me. And in part, it's because I know where you came from in the natural products industry, and with Natural Home, where you were editor-in-chief for, was it 11 years?
11 years, yes.
And that was a very fun magazine that not everybody is going to know about in the cannabis world. But to me, cannabis is a natural product.
Right, exactly. To me, this was, moving into the cannabis world was a natural extension of that. It made sense.
Totally was. And for people who don't really know that it is an industry, even though I don't really like the word industry. I prefer the word movement. You don't like the word movement, but it was all about purpose-driven products, alternatives for regular lifestyle, right? So organic, all of that. And you can tell a little bit about what that was like for you and how it fits with cannabis for you, in terms of getting into the niche, the community or the subculture within cannabis culture that we seem to find ourselves in.
Well, it's interesting that was something that I definitely, when, 5-6 years ago, so I guess 7 now, goodness, when I started to kind of make inroads into the cannabis industry, that was really the thing that I noticed the most, was how similar it was to the natural products industry in the early days. There was, and you remember this too, there was just a really sense of there's room for all of us. There wasn't, there was kind of a sense of collaboration, and, it was such a small industry in the beginning that, anybody coming with a new product was exciting rather than, kind of getting, people thinking, oh no, there's not room for another one. And that's how cannabis has been, I think, to a large extent, where, it's still, there's still kind of a peace, love, and understanding kind of vibe there because it's small and the suits haven't kind of moved in yet. They're, already clearly now they're starting to, and, it's a totally different world. And that's exactly what, you remember back in the day when it would be, you'd be at those, parties around Expo and stuff, and there'd be the hippies dancing in the circles and the suits kind of standing in the corners watching them. Yeah. And then pretty soon the hippies just quit going to those parties. I think that's what's going to happen in cannabis too. I think that they're very similar movements or industries, whatever we want to call them.
Well, I think what's happening is the fancy hippies, as Elizabeth Bass likes to call them. It's not that we're not dancing around the fires anymore with cannabis. I think that that's still happening. I think it's just, we have definitely started to develop our own subcultures within the so-called industry of cannabis.
Definitely.
And I know where I belong.
Dancing around the fire?
Well, not dancing, but, Chris is a really good fire guy.
That's right.
I have some of the best conversations, though, around those fires with
For sure.
various leaders of this. I hate the word industry. This is the truth. I just don't like it. I like to just say within Cannabis Liberation. That sums it up for me, But some of the conversations have been intense and amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's always cannabis present, so
that helps.
I also wanted to talk about that too, because I think one of the reasons they reached out to me, since I'm mostly known for psychedelic feminism, is this plant aspect of cannabis. And when I first started talking about it, not a lot of people were out there. But you knew what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris and I talk about this too a lot because not everybody gets the good stuff out of that medicine. There are people who don't find wisdom. There is the sort of, what did you call it, the stoner stigma. I think there are people who indulge and do get addicted, or at least develop a very, very strong habit,
mm-hmm.
fall into that aspect of cannabis that turns you in as opposed to brings you out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that?
Well, I'm always, I think that anybody could get, become dependent on any substance. And so I think that it has not to do with the substance itself, but with what's going on with the person. And so I'm always really hesitant, when people are like, they throw out these statistics, well, only 9% of people get dependent on, get addicted to cannabis. Like, first of all, who knows? Like, I suspect where these come from. But the other thing is, I just think that it's so much more complicated than that. And we can't ever blame the substance, right? So if cannabis did not exist and God never gave us this plant, I suspect that the people who become addicted to cannabis would find something else to ease their pain, right? So I really think that we've got to be super careful about, just saying that this is a substance that you 9% could, or whatever, could get addicted to, So I think, it affects everybody differently. And I don't think it's for me or anybody else to say how it should, For some people, it may be that they like that aspect. I like the going inward aspect sometimes. I'm not against that, right? I enjoy it. It's something that, I think is a cool part of cannabis. So, I think it just is we just have to be really careful about, and I think, we have that a lot too. And you and I have talked about this. I prefer cannabis over alcohol as an intoxicant, if we want to, be comparing intoxicants, but they're so different. So, I just think that, you can't, it's a tough conversation to have, because I don't think you can just say black and white, alcohol good, cannabis bad. I prefer cannabis myself. And I actually have a daughter who I, now that she's 21, I would say, and she's in Colorado where it's legal, I would say, I would push her that direction. Just, because she's on a college campus and all of the bad things that happen with alcohol culture. But that's a preference. That's a preference. And I just think that we don't need to be pitting the two against each other. We need to be kind of looking at it as a whole.
Yeah, it's the booze versus vape.
Yes.
Yeah. And we've had this conversation too. And it's interesting to think about the fact, like when we were in college, it was illegal. And I know that I've shared with you that I had a scholarship I was afraid to lose if anybody found out that I worked with cannabis. And I was working with it. I just wasn't aware that I was working with it. I never took it to go out and get stoned. I was an art student and I really worked on my craft, I remember that, in those days it was all this hidden culture, whereas today, at least in legal states, you can, I'm not saying you go out and flash it around, but you can just tuck this little vape into your.
Yes, you can. No, I just saw something really funny on Reddit. Yeah, it was like back in the day, and you'd go deep into the woods, and your hair, you'd have all of your make sure you didn't smell, and you'd wear a hat and everything, and then like today, it's like, oh, I'll just take a vape in Target. Why not? Right. I mean, it's crazy, but it's true. I mean, it is definitely, and for edibles, I mean, my gosh, you can,
I mean, edibles is just so discreet. That's the best.
Right? Totally bad. I guess I'm not this. I think this is, I was thinking about this actually the other day in the airport. And I was just, I had my edible before. And so I was just kind of having a lovely, walk through the airport, not stressed about anything. And I was thinking, I think airports are a better place since people are able to do this. I do. I think it's improved travel.
I'm laughing because, Chris will definitely indulge right before getting on. Me, it's the worst.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, no, I can't do it. But I'm one of those ones who can't get in the car either.
Really? So are you just like paranoid?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, when I drive at this point, I just get ridiculous. My normal neural networks of remembering how to drive just seem to have evaporated. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, my foot. And, it's ridiculous. I go 2 miles an hour. So I have learned. I know that. I think it really comes down to what we talk about of knowing yourself, right?
Yes, for sure.
That's the hardest thing I'm finding, thinking about these cannabis talking circles. How do you work with people who don't know their dose? I mean, what do you do when you're catering?
Well, we in Colorado, we've been saying this for 10 years now, but it's start low and go slow.
Right.
And, what I a lot of times tend to do is start people off with a mocktail that has a water soluble, like a Ripple, water Ripple, or Ibu makes one. Terrakino also makes one, but that is, you buy this in the dispensary, that for sure it is 10 milligrams because, it's been processed that way. And that's a great way to just kind of see where people are because, you can really, it's 10 milligrams. And you can see how they handle that and then see if they want more. Most people are on my side and erring on the side of not having, of starting low. And what I always tell them is, you can always eat more, but you can't eat less. Right. So you can't eat something. So, so we just, it's a slow process. And, if they get to the end of the meal and they're like, gosh, I really am not feeling enough. Then we can give them another Ripple. But they, I just would rather have them, not have enough than have too much. So
err on the side of caution when you're cooking.
Always. And especially, it's interesting because a lot of times they'll be smoking as well, right? Or they'll be drinking wine, which we really discourage. But if people want to, we're not going to tell them not to. So, that really exponentially changes things. So you've got to really be aware of, not just how many milligrams of THC they're getting, but also, what else are they imbibing? And also, how fatty is the meal that they're having? Because cannabis is, the cannabinoids are fat soluble. So if it's a super fatty meal, they're going to absorb more cannabinoids, right? Also, just the set and setting, all sorts of, all of the things that go into it. So, it's a big responsibility. And, to me, it's as big a responsibility as, I actually ended up not teaching yoga because it was such a huge responsibility. And I was always worried I was going to injure someone. And I feel that same level here. Like these people are my charges for the night. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they, don't overindulge. What I usually try to do is make sure that, not infuse